Hi. There is a concept in conflict resolution called BATNA. BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. BATNA. So what is BATNA? Best alternative to a negotiated agreement. BATNA is the idea that there are solutions that don't have to mean somebody loses what they want. BATNA is the idea that the way you win a negotiation is by giving everyone what they actually want versus what they say they want. You achieve win-win-win outcomes by understanding what constitutes a win for each party in the first place. BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, is the idea that when you go into a conversation, when you know already what the other party wants, needs, you can often find that the parties aren't in conflict over their core objectives. The conflicts are in the peripheral details. So the best alternative to a negotiated agreement is to get everyone the details that they want and need simply by sacrificing the details that are important to the other party but aren't important to them. Now, I'm sure that I have totally destroyed that definition and that description, and any trained mediator is going to come back to me in the comments and tell me all the ways in which I got the descriptions wrong and the definitions wrong. For my purposes, for our purposes, for what we're talking about in this small business context, it should be sufficient for the idea. So when you go into a negotiation, a conversation that in the business world typically looks like a sales conversation, what you typically want is the other party to buy your product at the price you want to set, and what you're willing to give them in exchange is something that is valuable to them. And if it's a just product and a just price, it's more valuable to them than the price you're about to charge them. You're going to set the value at a level such that when you give them the price, they're going to be happy that it's not higher. The price is commensurate with the value you're creating in their life and the risk that they are incurring. But I say that you're seeking win-win-win solutions partially because there may very well be people who are influenced by or affected by the outcome who are not directly part of the conversation. They are not included in the sales negotiation. Those other parties might be the actual beneficiary of the value the conversation creates in the universe. BATNA is the idea that when you start the conversation, what you're looking for is what are the other person's non-negotiables that happen to already be your negotiables. So if you're willing to give up something in order to get your non-negotiable, and they're willing to give up what ends up being your negotiable in exchange for their non-negotiable, you can achieve a BATNA, a best alternative to a negotiated agreement. But if you don't have overlapping values or goals or outcomes that neatly fit into the BATNA construct, what that framework still gives you is, by understanding what your non-negotiables are and what the other party's non-negotiable are, they give you the band in which to negotiate an agreement. So if there is something that is in fact non-negotiable for both parties, now you can isolate that criteria separate from all the other factors which are in fact negotiable by one party or the other. So here's how the conversation plays out in a different way on social media. I often have conversations with people in social media where I make a statement, and it's often worded as if it's often worded sarcastically, okay, I admit that. But it's often worded as if it is an absolute, this is the way it is, position statement on my part. But most of the time, I'm not actually expressing a non-negotiable on my part. Most of the time, in fact, I'm not even talking about something that is actually crucial or essential for my own operations, my own interests. I'm making statements to anchor an idea in the public discourse around which people can have a conversation to find where their non-negotiables are. Because so many people are so busy looking at the world from their own perspective that they're not even seeing the other person's perspective when that perspective is presented. So half the time when I make a statement in a public Facebook group, I'm saying something and I'm typically addressing it to a particular person, but my message is rarely intended primarily for that person. My message is almost never intended solely for that person. If it was intended solely for that person, I would have it as an offline conversation in a DM. That's the reality. The fact that I'm making a statement on LinkedIn or on Facebook in a public thread or in a private group that has a large enough audience that is effectively public, the fact that I'm making that statement in that setting, means I'm trying to have a conversation to draw out other people's positions on the matter. Even when I'm making an absolute statement, unless you already know that it is a topic that is I'm willing to die on a hill for kind of topic, the odds that it is pretty low. There are a handful of things, a handful of non-negotiable principles in this world that I would be willing to die for. That list is not very long. And I'm very willing to have conversations on a lot of other topics. So you can bet that if I'm having a conversation on one of those other topics, whatever statement I just made is not one that is a BATNA for me. Sorry, that is an anchor point for me. That is a non-negotiable issue for me. You can bet that I'm trying to detect where your non-negotiables are so that I can identify whether there is a BATNA that gives both of us and the 3 or 4 other people that are in the conversation who aren't actively participating room to achieve their win as well, room to achieve their non-negotiable, and thus a win-win-win is 100% possible in the world in which we live. I'm Keith Bashirs, and this is the concept of BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement, or how you achieve win-win-win. BATNA.